Good morning, everybody. Oh God, you are my God. Earnestly I seek you. My soul thirsts for you. My flesh yearns for you. In a dry and weary land where there is no water, oh God. Oh God, you are my God. Earnestly I seek you. My soul thirsts for you, and my flesh yearns for you. In a dry and weary land where there is no water, I remember you at night through the watches of the night. In the shadow of your wings I sing because you help me. My soul clings to you, and your hand upholds me. You alone, you alone, you alone, you alone. Order my steps in your word, dear Lord. Lead me, guide me every day. Send your anointing, Father, I pray. Order my steps in your word. Please order my steps in your word. your will. While you are working, help me be still. 'Cause evil is busy, God is real. Order my steps in your word. Please order my steps in your word. I want to walk worthy, my calling to fulfill. Please order my steps, Lord, and I'll do your blessed will. The world is ever changing, but you are still the same. If you order my steps, I'll praise your name. Guide my tongue, let my words ever find acceptance, Lord, in thy sight. Take charge of my thoughts both day and night. Order my steps in your word. Please order my steps in your word. I want to walk worthy, my calling to fulfill. Please order my steps, Lord, and I will do your blessed will. The world is ever changing, but you are still the same. If you order my steps, I'll praise your name. I want to walk worthy, my calling to fulfill. Please order my steps, Lord, and I will do your blessed will. The world is ever changing, but you are still the same. If you order my steps, I will praise your name. Order my steps in your word. Order my tongue in your word. Guide my feet in your word. Wash my heart in your word. Order my steps in your word. Order my tongue in your word. Guide my feet in your word. Wash my heart in your word. Show me how to walk in your word. Show me how to talk in your word. I need a brand new song to sing. Show me how to let your praises ring in your Please order my steps in your word. Please order my steps in your word. I want to walk worthy, my calling to fulfill. Please order my steps, Lord, and I will do your blessed will. World is ever changing, but you are still the same. If you order my steps, I'll praise your name. My God, where'er I go, glory. Where I reap and where I sow, glory. When my hand it grips the thorn, glory. In the still and in the storm, glory. Glory. Oh, we labor unto glory till heaven and earth are one. Oh, we labor unto glory until God's kingdom comes. The sun, it shines and then goes down, glory. Rain, it pours and beats the ground, glory. Dust, it blows and ends my days, still glory. Hearts, they burn beneath your gaze, glory. Glory. Oh, we labor unto glory till heaven and earth are one. Oh, we labor unto glory until God's kingdom comes. We labor unto glory, heaven and earth are one. Oh, we labor unto glory until God's kingdom comes. My heart, my hands, their kingdom bound, glory. Where thorns no longer curse this ground, glory. So trim the wick and light the flame, glory. My work, it will not be in vain, glory. Glory. Oh, we labor unto glory till heaven and earth are one. Yes, we labor unto glory until God's kingdom comes. Oh, we labor. Oh, we labor unto glory till heaven and earth are one. Oh, we labor unto glory until God's kingdom comes. Well, hello everybody. My name is Vince Brackett. I'm one of the pastors here. Before we sing one more song together, I want to lead us in our guided prayer for today. It is the second Sunday of Advent today, the 4 weeks that lead up to Christmas. And a tradition for us here at Brown Line Church each Sunday of Advent, as we light our Advent candles, is singing the Christmas carol and hymn, O Come, Emmanuel, together, adding a verse each week. So for today, as the second Sunday of Advent, we're going to sing 2 verses and 2 choruses together, and we will light the first 2 purple candles. In the past, when we've done this, it's one of the things I look forward to most in the year is we're getting to sing together, and it's a pretty well-known melody, and it's a haunting and beautiful melody, and we all get to sing it together, and we hear our kind of voices. We do it a cappella without any instruments, and we hear our voices rise together in the Davis Theater with the high ceilings, and it sounds really beautiful. And we don't get to experience that this year, so I'm encouraging us to engage a slightly different way. So what I want to do is each week focus on a different word and just kind of have that word playing over and over again in your mind as we sing. And so last week we looked at the word ransom. And this week, appropriately, I want to encourage us to look at a word in the second verse, which is Advent. We actually use the word Advent in this verse. So the advent of something is the arrival of something. During Advent, we are preparing for the arrival of God among humanity in the baby Jesus. God is not distant. God comes to be with people in Jesus. And one idea from the way that I'm brought to here is an idea of the way that Jesus talked about and taught people about God, and it really helps me, and so I'll pass it on here. And it's the idea that our lives are forever a mix of arrived Advents and still on the way, not yet Advent. A mix of now and not yet. A mix of here and still far off. Like that is just the way life works. Jesus often talked about the kingdom of God or the rule of God, like the poetic language that we use in our last song, where we labor unto glory until God's kingdom comes. God's will is done on earth, as the Our Father prayer says. And sometimes when when Jesus taught about the kingdom of God, he talked about it as if it was right here in our midst. At this very moment, the kingdom of God is here and at hand. But then other times he talked about it as if it was a long way off, as if it was still coming, or maybe not too long a way off, but it's still arriving. It's not here yet. And I think this helps me because it just feels like an outlook that makes sense with how life really works. It feels deeply true. Like there are so many things I'm longing for to be true that are not true. And there are, at the same time, many things that are wonderful and are deeply true. And I do feel bring me love and passion and hope and joy right in the mix of whatever is my truth right now. It's a mixed bag. And so I think that I cling to this idea of Advent, of arrival and yet not yet fully arrived, because it reminds me that Jesus doesn't give us false promises. But Jesus is also not cynical and without belief or hope. The outlook here is a mature one. It's a reasonable one. And he treats us like grown-ups. He's hopeful, but also, deeply real at the same time. And so that's part of the wisdom of the yearly rhythm of Christmas. That's part of the wisdom of the yearly rhythm of Advent. It is a reminder that to live maturely, hopefully, purposefully, joyfully for the long haul, we must embrace living in that mix of good and just things being so, and bad and not yet healed things being so. Some things are here and arrived, and some things are not yet here, not yet arrived. And we look to God to continue to come each year. So I'm going to light our candles, and we're lighting 2 candles and singing 2 verses of O Come, Emmanuel today. Sing with me. O come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel, that mourns in lowly exile here, until the Son of God appear. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. O come, thou day spring, come and cheer our spirits by thine advent here. Disperse the gloomy clouds of night, and death's dark shadows put to flight. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. O come, all ye faithful, joyful and triumphant. O come ye to Bethlehem. Come and behold him, born the King of angels. Oh, come, let us adore him. Oh, come, let us adore him. Oh, come, let us adore him. Christ the Lord. Oh, come, let us adore him. Oh, come, let us adore him. Oh, come, let us adore him. Christ the Lord. Sing, choirs of angels, sing in exaltation. Sing, all ye citizens of heaven above. Glory to God, all glory in the highest. Oh, come, let us adore. Oh, come, let us adore him. Oh, come, let us adore him. Christ the Hey, Lord, we greet thee on this happy morning. Jesus, to thee be all glory. Christ the Lord.
Oh, come indeed. Hi, everybody. Good morning, and good morning, Jesus. Some of the hardest times in life are when we're waiting, when we have to sit and just anticipate the next thing, whatever it is. And sometimes, actually, quite often when you're in that space, it's something bad, anxiety or hope that may or may not be fulfilled, or something that's taking a long time, like change, like waiting for someone to understand better, or waiting for something to happen that feels like the world deserves. And I really just want to invite Jesus into our space of waiting today. Just sit with us, put a hand on our shoulder, tell us, hey, this might be long, this might take a while, this might be hard, this might be difficult, this might provoke anxiety or fear or stress. But there's so many things that we're waiting for that we all deserve, and that are going to be really, really good when we get them. Things like a vaccine, things like music and togetherness again, things like family members that we haven't seen in a while. And so Jesus, just hold my hand, hold all of our hands. Let us feel you today, waiting with us and knowing that the waiting is easier because you're there. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Rebecca. Thank you for opening us. Again, I am Vince Brackett. I'm one of the pastors here, and we hope that the music and the prayer has helped to pull you outside of yourself and feel connected with God this morning, a little bit more resourced than what you can cook up your own in life. Brownline Church is both a local and an online community based in Chicago, but drawing many people beyond Chicago every week. So welcome from wherever you are joining us. We started this church to be a space to grow spiritually, in particular for people who feel more comfortable in progressive or secular or multi-perspective settings rather than religious settings. There are lots of churches for people who feel comfortable in religious settings, who know the norms and the customs and all of the ins and outs of those spaces. But there are not many that engage those of us who maybe never grew up in such a religious setting, or who did but have chosen to leave highly religious settings. And so we hope that you feel at home here, wherever it is you're coming from, whatever your religious background or lack thereof. Like most people, we are after deep, full life. That is what we're after. We want to live beyond self-centeredness. We want to live beyond the status quo. We want to be resilient in the midst of hard things. And our guide here at Brownline Church is Jesus. There are religious settings that present faith in Jesus as an exclusive thing, as a boundary drawing thing, as a thing that you're either inside of or outside of. But our experience is entirely different. And so we want you to know that following Jesus and the spiritual growth that we try to pursue, that which is grounded in the biblical tradition here, it's always made us more inclusive and never more closed off. And so we hope that you feel connected with as a result of that today. A quick shout outs before we get moving today with our discussion, which I'm looking forward to. Our shout outs today are to Aaron Loescher for running our visuals. Thank you, Aaron, for being the screen share person today. We appreciate you. And to Allison May, thank you, Allison, for being our moderator for today, who's going to be making sure that we have everything we need in our chat for today, whether you're joining here on Zoom or you're joining over on Facebook Live. Allison, as we move forward today, just to kind of get us into the chat, do you have any sort of prompt for us to get us going?
Yes. So I was just realizing the other day that because I'm not really going into stores as much, I'm not hearing Christmas music. I don't think I've heard like a single Christmas song except for today. So my question for everybody is, what's your favorite Christmas song?
Excellent. I like it. I want to see what comes up, and maybe we'll all be adding to our various Spotify streaming lists before the end of today. I'll throw in a vote for one oldie and then one that's relatively newer. My oldie is the James Taylor Christmas album. James Taylor is a 70s singer-songwriter that holds a special place in my family's heart, and so I'm a big James Taylor fan. And then I'll throw my more recent listens are the Michigan singer-songwriter Sufjan Stevens and his Christmas volumes. He has like 7 or something like that. It's a ridiculous amount, and there's a lot of gems on there. I really enjoy his arrangements. So there's mine. All right. As we acknowledge, today is the second Sunday of Advent, the 4 weeks leading up to Christmas. And historically, one of the themes of Advent is hope. And so that's what we have elected to lean into this year as a church, hope, all Advent. Last week, to kick us off with our Advent time, we looked at hope as an internal experience, like we see in these two elderly figures in the Jesus tradition, Simeon and Anna from the Bible. This is in this traditional Advent passage, Luke chapter 2. We see these two elderly individuals see the baby Jesus and have these incredible experiences of hope. And we distinguished hope from feeling optimistic. Optimism is great. Like, we have no problem with optimism, all for optimism. But optimism is dependent on external good news, whereas hope is an internal thing, and it's not dependent on external evidence. And so therefore, it's more resilient and it's more powerful. But because it's internal, it's on us to kindle it. Like, we have to do that for ourselves, and we have to do that for each other in community. And so that is what we are trying to do. We had a great interactive conversation last week about hope and what's feeding hope internally for all of us. If you are somebody who's engaging over our Discord online community, we started the channel Hope Fuel in our Discord last week. And we dropped a bunch of the things that were mentioned on Sunday in there, and we want to keep that going. So if anything is giving you hope right now, feeding that internal thing, kindling that fire that will get put out if we are only focused on external evidence, please tell us what you're following. Please tell us what's giving you hope, and drop it in that hope fuel thing so that we can all kind of be bettered for it. All right, but for today's discussion, I will once again introduce my co-pastor, Kyle Hannawalt, and pass on to him. Kyle, hello.
Hello, thank you. I realized a lot of my Christmas songs are ones that I just find the most fun singing. Like, is there anything better than a song that requires you to sing ba-rum-bum-bum-bum? It's just like, where else does that happen? Best lyrics? Probably not. Best meaning? Probably not. But clearly the most fun to sing. So I'll roll that way. But thank you, everybody here. I'm excited to have a conversation today about something that I think probably provokes as much disappointment, as much anxiety, probably steals as much hope as almost any conversation that I've been a part of. And that is specifically today, how do we hold on to hope when divided America is our family? I would say when I am feeling like maybe the world could be turning towards the better, or I think that there's a version of the future that feels full of God's heart come manifest in this world, nothing can steal that more than a conversation with a close friend or a close family member who seems to see the world in a completely different way. It's hard to hold on to hope in a more racially integrated, racially just America when you have a conversation with a family member that isn't able to acknowledge the realities of systemic racism. It's hard to hold on to hope about a world that sees and values the LGBTQ community when you talk to a close friend who seems to not see that as something that our country should be fighting for. And I think today, as I want to invite in a moment my conversation partner for this, I think it's really important that we think about how we keep our hope in those moments where so often it feels stolen. Because how on earth are we going to change the world if I can't change my sister's opinion? How on earth are we going to see a better future if I can't convince my mother? How on earth are we going to see a more just society if my brother doesn't want to hear what I have to say? And so for my conversation partner today, we don't enter this as experts that have answers here at all. Instead, I thought the conversation part that seems like I was super excited to invite into this is because we actually started this conversation a few years back, just started chatting about how on earth do you navigate this? How on earth do you navigate your disappointments? Where is the ownership and the sense of responsibility to speak out? And then where is those moments where that's not actually doing much? Like, how do you navigate this? And so I'm really excited to be inviting in Christina Culver for this conversation as somebody who has really intentionally spent time getting better at navigating these close relationships to ourselves and figuring out how on earth do you raise kids in this kind of world, figuring out how do we relate to people around us. And I think both of us are excited to talk about this just through the work that we've done in the process of figuring out how to do more, but also live a life that does feel thriving and in line with our own values. So Christina, as a part of our financial board, is also somebody that just generally, I think, thinks about life and faith in ways that I think everyone would be edified for. Certainly I have. And so I'm excited to invite Christina in, and I'm just going to bring up our first point to jump in, and then I'll pass it to you here, Christina. Our first point in talking about how do you hold on hope when your family feels like divided America is that we preserve hope by checking our expectations. We thought a lot about the passage of Jesus in Matthew 13 of those who have ears, let them hear. How on earth do we hold on to hope when by checking our expectations? And I think at the heart of this is the idea that if our expectations are that we're going to change somebody else's mind, that is what we're looking for in a conversation, we are often going to find it hard to hold on to hope, because the reality of it is changing other people's minds is so rarely something we are able to do, particularly with those closest to us. Christina, I'm curious, can you tell me a little bit more, kind of your thoughts and some of around what does it mean to hold on to hope by checking our expectation in these conversations?
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. I'm very happy to be here. And like Kyle said, I am not an expert on this, but I have spent a lot of time having conversations and thinking about this. And it has been a hard lesson for me to understand that if I have the expectation that people will change their mind based on what I tell them, that it's just not going to happen. And for a long time, I felt like if I wasn't going into a conversation boldly holding my stance, really fighting the fight until they had changed their mind, I wasn't doing my part. But I don't join confrontation very willingly. And so what I found was that I wasn't engaging at all. And that's not acceptable either. And so it was me figuring out, I have to look at my audience and adjust accordingly, which is funny to me. Being a teacher, it's like, I've always done that. I always adjust the material based on who I'm teaching. And yet in such a real world application, I was completely missing it. So I had to figure that out, and I'm still learning that. But I really feel like only recently have I had success with that, where I went into a situation knowing that the other person had a very different view, and I was able to speak from my experience and not feel like I was attacking them or not approaching it like, you're wrong, this is why you're wrong. And I was able to hold on to my integrity, allow them to hold on to their integrity. And the next day we had another conversation about a different topic, but it was just as controversial, and we did it again. And that experience really gave me hope in that it is worth taking the time before I enter a situation to really think about, okay, where are these people and what is my goal? And maybe my goal is simply just to say, that hasn't been my experience, or I don't agree with that, or I think I'm going to have to look into that more. Because sometimes that's enough. Sometimes I just don't want to take the bait of the other person, but I do want to make it clear that I don't agree. And then other times I know that I can engage, and I just need to adjust maybe how I present it, or, keep it. This has been my experience. So that has been really helpful in understanding that people aren't going to change their minds, but perhaps if I can share my experience, then maybe it will plant a seed for them to just consider. And so that's been helpful in these times. And it's taken me a very long time to learn that, but it has been helpful to me.
I love that, Christina. I think that there's the sense of we particularly have this like feeling of when we're particularly talking about things that feel like matters of justice. Like, my goal here is I need to go and convince these people around me to come and switch their position. But the reality and what research tells us, what our human experience tells us, is that new information is usually not the thing that changes people's minds. And what we need to figure out is, do people really even have ears to hear? I had a counselor a while ago say to me, going into stressful relational conversations, say, what are you looking for in this conversation? Do you think that there's any chance that you'll get that? And that was really helpful for me, because I realized what I was looking for is for them to change their mind and then agree with me. Or I was looking for somebody to affirm a part of me that I knew that they weren't going to affirm. Or I was looking for something, and this expectation shift of, so what can I get out of this? Like, what is on the table? And for me to shift, like, what are things on the table to make it, I can make it clear where I stand on things. I can shift it so that I can be trying to open up space if there is room for conversation and I'm wrong on that. And I think shifting that around, I think for me has really been helpful. And I think it's helped me shift the way I have conversations practically, from jumping right in and like delivering my argument on why you're wrong, and shifting it more towards phrases of like, I really don't see it that way. Or, wow, I see that differently. Or, that's really not been my experience. And those things allow me to still say, no, I don't think that's true. And I don't think that that's the case. However, I'm going to be clear about where I'm at, but realizing like you're not in a place to do that. And the truth is, when we carry that stress, we carry that burden, I think you're right on that it actually usually demotivates us from really doing anything, because we're expecting family members to do things, or friends to do things, or the people around us to do things. We're usually almost more easily influenced by strangers at times than our family members in particular. And I think that one thing
on purpose. I think we
absolutely
put up our
tell me
wall
more.
and be like, no, you're not going to be the one to change my mind. Like, you don't know anything,
They also often joke about that, like in a marriage, that you just can't hear it from your spouse. You can hear the exact same thing, but it can't be from your mother. It can't be from your brother. It has to be from somebody else. And then all of a sudden it clicks in. One thing you and I talked about this too in our expectations is how our expectations shift depending on who is present, depending on the power and the privilege of those that are part of the conversation. I'm just curious, would you mind just kind of bringing this in a little bit more about what does it mean to change our expectations? Like, you and I both own the privileged part of our experience, me being a white man, you being a white woman, how we can enter into conversations and the stakes of them are different because of the way that it impacts us. But both of us had talked earlier about the need to shift those things depending on who is present or what the context of that is. I'm just curious if you might speak to that for a moment.
Well, I definitely know that I'm speaking from a place of privilege, and I understand that I get to pick my battles. And I also understand that when I shift expectations to protect myself, that's privilege. That there are people who don't have that privilege right off the bat because their skin is a different color, or, whatever the difference may be. So I know that. And part of adjusting how I approach conversations is, for this, it's I guess I'm not doing a very good job of saying this, but one thing that I feel like I've had to engage in is that if the other person is doing harm, regardless of the person at the receiving end of that is present, then that's a new, like a new boundary that I have to draw of, I am going to say something. And even if it is not, at that point, it's not about changing the other person's mind. It's purely about keeping the integrity of the marginalized party in that conversation. And so in that case, it's just about, in that case, I don't want to engage. We clearly see things differently, but I cannot leave thinking that I agree. And I also can't leave with you thinking that what you're saying is okay. So it's not just like I see that differently. It's bigger, which is hard. It's very hard for me. But what I have found is that if I leave a situation where I have not kept my integrity or someone else's integrity, then that ick sticks with me for a long time, way longer than if I had just had that interaction and huffed about it afterwards and moved on. It really sticks with me if I don't. I'm not good at this, like I really struggle with finding the words to say like, hey, I'm going to stop you there. But even if it's in this really fumbled, teary way, it has to be something, or the disappointment and regret sticks with me for way too long. So I've just found that boundary is a hard boundary of, look, I'm going to say something and then stop.
Yeah. I think that's incredibly important. It's one thing to be sitting with your aunt at Thanksgiving and having them say something that is sexist, homophobic, racist, xenophobic, and for you to say, I really don't see it that way. It's another thing if they are being homophobic and there is somebody that is in that space, or you yourself are part of the LGBT community, because it is that we're already saying, like, the ability for you to change their mind is not what is happening here. It's about making sure that we are not giving space for anybody to steal honor and value from other people. And so I think when we talk about these conversations, our expectations do have to be influenced by our level of power and privilege and the level of the power and privilege of people around. Because if you are making it clear that you disagree, that is one thing, but you need to actually turn your attention to be protecting and advocating for yourself if you're part of that community, and then also protecting those around those. Exactly. As Vince says, if there's someone actually hurt by the words of the moment, you have to center the person that is being hurt in that space. And I think this is a perfect transition for us. Part of this is shifting our expectations. And I think that we will lose our hope for the world if our hope is that the people around us will magically change their perspective. We have to figure out how to navigate a broken world where that is not the case. That is an important first step. But the second step that we talked about is that we preserve our hope by creating boundaries for ourselves. It's not just that I expect that my aunt might say something, or my brother might say something, or somebody around may say something, and I need to figure out, to expect what I'm looking for in that conversation. I need to create boundaries for what feels good and safe to me. I think about when Jesus was doing ministry and his brothers and mother came to him and he says, who is my mother and who are my brothers? There's a sense of those that are closest to us often can inflict the most damage to us, and that we love them, and that can be a wonderful thing. But there's also deeply important for us to create some boundaries. I'm curious for you, can you just tell us a little bit more about kind of what your thoughts about navigating this conversation and creating boundaries for it?
Sure. And I feel like I've kind of pulled in boundaries already. And again, I say this from a place of privilege. I understand that, I'm a white woman. I am married to a man with 3 kids. Growing up Christian, there's a lot of privilege in my life. So I know that I draw these boundaries from that place. But boundaries have always been hard for me, because boundaries to me have always equaled conflict, and I don't seek out conflict. I just, it's uncomfortable, and I don't like to be in that space. However, as I've grown up, and especially with kids, I've had to learn how to draw boundaries, and especially as my kids are getting older and they're hearing things and they're seeing things. And if I'm saying one thing and doing another, I don't like that. And so I have, going along with what we talked about before about this expectation that you're going to change people's minds, I also have to draw boundaries of that allow me and my family to stay safe and healthy. But again, the idea of keeping my integrity. And so one of the boundaries that I've had to learn to draw is if I'm around people, who disagree with me and I adjust who I am, how is that going to feel when I leave the situation? And it is as simple as, like if I go home and I take my water bottle that has like my love is love is love sticker on it, is that going to, start a conversation that I want to avoid? Am I going to leave that here? If people, not now, but when people were visiting our house and we have all these different books, we have My Two Mommies, or a book all about racism, or a book all about disabilities, or, all these different books that we've intentionally brought into our home. Or is that going to make someone uncomfortable? Do I put those in the closet? And what I have figured out is that, yes, that might be easier in the meantime, in that moment, but the feeling of regret that comes after is way worse than just if I stood up for what I believed in. Even if it doesn't engage in a conversation, I know that they're going to be thinking things, right? It's like, so I have just had to draw a boundary that says, this is who I am. I can only be responsible for who I am. And I know that if I don't keep moving forward with who I am and change who I am for you, I am not holding a boundary. And so that is what I've had to learn to draw. And it's not easy. But again, I say that from privilege. Like I'm talking about a sticker on a water bottle, not like, hey, this is my wife. Like, like the boundaries that I have to draw are very different. And I understand that. But I also understand that if I choose the easy route and not draw those boundaries and not hold them, then I am being silent, and that's not acceptable. So what I have had to learn is, where am I going to draw the boundary that keeps my integrity and also keeps the integrity of the things that I believe, including the people involved in those issues, and being okay with however the other person reacts. I am not responsible for their reaction. I'm responsible for my action and how I react to them and engage in them. But I'm going to draw this line and say, this is who I am, because and that's hard. I have, like I said, I don't engage in conflict willingly. So, but again, being a parent and having kids and kids watching, and man, those eyes, they're constantly seeing everything. And it's just like, I don't want to be a hypocrite. And boundaries have been a huge part of not being one, I think, for me.
The thing I love so much about that, Christina, is, it's incredible. It's not an easy part to say I'm going to lay boundaries about what part of myself I'm going to like not get into. Like, there's certain family members like, I'm going to lay a boundary. We're not going to talk about that because you are not a safe person to talk about that with. There's people that I know that if they do something that hurts me, I have learned over time, bringing that hurt to them is actually not a safe thing. Like if I bring that hurt to them, they are not, it goes back to, and I think it's like the building blocks of what are your expectations? And then based off that, you build your boundaries. My expectation is that you're going to apologize and acknowledge that you did something really hurtful. There's some people in my life, that's just not on the table. Like you're not going to do that. And so I'm no longer going to go to you for forgiveness. I'm no longer going to go to you to make it okay. Because I know if I do that, and I think boundaries are protecting your personal honor, your emotional health, your physical health, and your mental health. Those are the things about it's protecting who you are. But the piece I think you laid in there that I think is incredibly important and easy to miss is boundaries are also protecting your identity. Like I am not going to hide who I am, that it is actually a boundary violating thing for me to feel like I need to hide my books about My Two Mommies. It is a boundary violating thing, particularly for those of us that parts of our identities are in this marginalization. That there's it's not only that my boundary is I'm going to protect myself because you are likely going to hurt me, but I'm also going to protect my identity. And that means that I'm not going to hide who I am. I'm not going to hide this part of me. And I'm going to let this be here and realize that I need to do that and recognize that is going to impact how other people interact with us, because it is going to change what's happening. And the thing about boundaries is it shifts it away from managing other people's expectations, managing other people's actions, and really being intentional and managing ourselves. So asking the question is, how do I stay safe in this relationship? How do I stay safe in this situation? And the stakes of that go from, you know what, it is really damaging to my heart to hear that person say that again, to it is damaging to me in particular, like as a human, to be in a space. And I also think our boundaries shift again with those around us, that my boundaries for protecting myself don't end with myself. We're protecting those around us too. So if I'm in a space, my boundaries need to then extend to, I am not going to accept you doing it. I'm going to protect those around me as well, particularly if we are talking about issues of justice. And I think that it's a really difficult balance in doing that. You know, and I'm curious for you, you talked a little bit about how you felt a sense of freedom in this space. I think boundaries are really hard, and I think they're important because they protect us, but there is that sense of like the hardness of keeping a boundary and feeling the tension in the relationship versus the hardness of not keeping a boundary and maybe maintaining peace in the relationship, but the internal recognition that I let that boundary be violated. I just wonder if you could talk a little bit more about what that internal shift from when it's hard relationally versus when it's hard internally because you let your boundaries get stepped over.
Yeah. Well, the internal is just, there was one situation that happened months ago, and it still sits with me as if it was yesterday. And I have talked through it. I understand, I have forgiven myself for it, but that internal conflict of when you don't stand up for your integrity or keep things safe it's just this really awful thing, right? And then you have the relationship side of, I have found the relationship part, I'm pretty lucky in that the people in my life who have opposing views, there is enough love to say, you know what, let's just stop there. And let's just, so I am extremely fortunate for that. So I can have these conversations and I can draw boundaries and say, we're going to stop there, or I'm going to stop there. And if you want to keep saying what you want to say, understand that I'm not engaging. But for me, the internal conflict of not holding a boundary has been far worse than any engagement I have had. And again, I think that's privilege. I think that I think my battles are different, but it's been hard. And I will say this, that a big motivator for me to continue drawing boundaries and enter conflict, even though it's hard, is my children, in that we don't know who our children are going to grow up to be. I have no idea who my daughters will marry, who they'll fall in love with, who their best friends will be. And if I don't truly create a home where I say all these things and then I have to actually be that, embody that, then they'll never trust that they can come home and be safe. They'll never trust that they can come home and say, Mom, I love this girl, and truly know that I will accept them. So if I am not drawing those boundaries now with people who also love them, then I just don't think that they'll ever be able to come home and feel safe. And that is too much for me to think that I could ever create that. So when things are hard and I'm like, oh, this really is terrible, like terribly uncomfortable, like they are my motivation to keep engaging and drawing these boundaries, because they're just too important not to, so.
Such well said, Christina. I'd love that. I'd love to bring in Allison too. Is there anything in the chat that you feel is either a theme or something people are saying there that kind of can add into the conversation?
Yeah, there's a lot going on about boundaries. And yeah, so Christina, just want to say you are not alone in feeling like it's difficult to establish boundaries. A lot of us feel that way.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I feel like I could just read this whole chat. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff. There is something that Rebecca said that I really liked that I'm trying to find, and something that Beth said too. Okay, so Beth said about creating boundaries and letting go of the worry of offending, because something common that's been coming up is resonating with that idea that boundaries can mean conflict, and being afraid that you're going to offend that other person. So I really appreciated what Beth said about letting go of that worry of offending, still maintaining respect.
Yeah.
You can't control what that other person is offended by. And then I just feel like what everything Rebecca says, I'm like, yes, please. Sorry to put you on the spot there, Rebecca. But even Rebecca saying something about like it's on that other person to adjust to the truth of who, especially if you're being a marginalized person, it's on that other person to adjust to that truth. And I just think that there's just so much strength in that, like so much resilience and standing there and, knowing it's on that other person. Yeah, a lot of people saying, that it's something they work on, mentors are helping, but resonating with that idea that it's really hard when it's family. And also just saying too, there's been some comments too, like on Christina, on your last point of like having that boundary that your children see so that they could feel safe, like no matter what happens in their future, that they could come to you and feel safe. As someone who doesn't have children, I've never really thought about it from that perspective before. And that's just beautiful, and so important. So, and yeah, I think maybe does it help you? Does it give you like more confidence to do that when you think about your daughters like looking to you and seeing that model?
Yeah, absolutely. If it wasn't for them, I think I would be in a very different place. I've always been a socially minded person, but it's very easy to kind of like shrink away from things. And with kids, I mean, from being in a classroom, like they're watching for your consistency, they're watching, right? And so it's the same in a family where, they're watching how you approach people. They're watching how kind or not kind you are to someone, especially if I'm reading this book and I'm like, oh, look, they have different skin than we do. And, and discussing all of that. And then if I go out and I engage with someone who's of a different skin color and I'm not kind, like what in the world? Like what a conflicting message. So yes, 100% have they given me the motivation to be braver and continue this work.
I deeply resonate with that. And I think if we all somehow lived our lives a little bit more through the lens of those that we influence, I wonder how that would shape things a little bit differently for us rather than just ourselves. Before we move to our last point, there's one piece here that we talked about a little bit, Christina, and I'll just speak a little autobiographically. So when I don't set good boundaries, I tend to just block people out. We talked a little bit about cancel culture when we were talking on the phone. Yeah. And to me, the only ability I've been able to find is to maintain relationship with people that I love, who think differently than me, is to create really good boundaries for myself and be honest about those expectations. And in times of my life when I haven't done that, I tend to just block that person out entirely because I can't even deal. You're out of my life. Opposed to when I've learned how to create boundaries and expectations to say, we can talk about holiday recipes. We can do that. You're not allowed to come around to me when my kids are around. That's just not on the table anymore. However, you and I can, in this boundary with these expectations, we can figure out, particularly with people that are like family and we're trying to figure out how to stay in life. I'm just curious, just your take a little bit about this balance of standing up for justice, standing up for right, but also this human proclivity just to cancel people in general. I wonder if you could just speak a little bit about that before we move into our last point.
Yeah, sure. Like I said before, like I felt like I had to go into conversations like, you will understand and you are wrong and I'm gonna, I'm gonna stand up for this until you get it, or I would cancel you. And I was lucky enough to hear a conversation by Emmanuel Acho, the author of Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man, about cancel culture. And I hadn't thought of it this way, but here I am expecting people with opposing views to come to this table and hear everything that I have to say and then agree with me. And I don't have to adjust myself at all. And so that was a lesson in like, if I want them to hear me and to be open to my ideas, I have to hear them and be open to their ideas as well. And I don't have to agree with them, and I can, state my point, but to say like, I do think there are people out there who do harm, and you draw a line and we're done. Like, I'm going to avoid you. You are not safe. But I think the majority of people, fortunately for me, in our life are not that way. And so I, again, have just tried to adjust my expectations and my approach so that it doesn't become a cancel thing. And I've had to learn that there's a spot in the middle of being silent and canceling someone. And that gray area is something that I'm trying to figure out. And with it comes boundaries. And one thing that I have learned in just the past few months is that I really wish I could find someone who was on the opposite side, and I could say, I really just want to learn from you. And I am not here coming from a place of judgment. I just want to understand. And I wish I could start more conversations that way, because it's like, I just don't understand where you're coming from. So can you like tell me? So if I could start conversations and disarm them and help them let their guard down, because that's what happens with me. Like right now, I feel like my guard is up, and it's like, I'm just talking with you. And then this community, I feel like, is like, sees things the way I see. And it's like, if I could, anyway, I think I'm going off topic here. I just feel like if I can disarm myself and put my wall down and somehow start the conversation very quickly with the other person, like, I'm so curious what your thoughts are on this, or could you explain to me like where you're coming from here, or, just put it on them to explain, then maybe that would help. But I really feel like cancel culture, I used to think that was appropriate. Like you have to cancel people because that's how you take a stand. And this conversation that I watched was really like, we're never going to get anywhere if we continue canceling people. And so that was really helpful to me to hear and to see. And like I said, I do think people can cause enough harm to be like, you're done in certain situations, but
this has been an interesting dance for me, Christina, as a white man working in a field that is addressing educational equity with a team around me where I am the only one that holds the privilege of both being an educated white man. Yep. And my boundaries are different, because the way that my identity is at stake, the way that my personal trauma is lived out is different. And so I am able to stick in conversations longer with people who I think that their viewpoint is incredibly damaging. I think their viewpoint is not only harmful to the people around us, but perpetuating a brokenness of our society that I believe Jesus is pushing against. But my boundaries can be slightly different, because my personal trauma and my identity are not at stake. However, I have seen wise people around me who so I've seen women that I work with that I respect a lot realize that this man is just not honoring. He's not willing to listen to me. He needs to hear this from a man. And that just being like in a deeply broken thing, but them having to develop a boundary of like, I'm not going to go there, because if I keep going there, this is going to damage me. And I've seen my friends of color that have had the exact same conversation of, I'm not willing to do that. And so I think that we have to think about our boundaries. And I think power and privilege is deeply interwoven with where our boundaries need to live. And I think that there is ownership over those of us that have privilege to make sure that we're figuring out how to do this intentionally and do this well. And then there's also a great importance for all of us to create boundaries, because if not, then we are going to be paralyzed in effecting change in this world, which I think brings us to our last point here, which is, in the midst of having our families feel like divided America, we preserve hope by celebrating and noticing the impact we do have. It is so easy. I can still remember a conversation from when I was 16 years old that went poorly, where I wasn't able to convince somebody of something and it went terrible. And it's so easy for us to forget that we do have impact. We do have the ability to make change. And I think it's so super important that we celebrate those things. I'm curious if, and I think especially not to lose hope, to hold on to hope, we need to celebrate. There's a correlation between thankfulness and hope. Thankfulness for the past breeds hope for the future. I'm curious, could you tell me just a little bit for you on this kind of third piece of maintaining hope, what that looks like, or your experience and thoughts around how we make sure that we celebrate the impact we do have for those that do have ears to hear?
Yeah, I think I've seen hope with my kids. A very, very small example would be when they're coloring and they, when I was growing up, skin color was peach. And I would say, oh, skin color, peach crayon, and they pick up the brown color and they color skin brown. They pick up the different colors of different skin, and they don't say skin, oh, I need the peach for this one, or I need the brown for this one. And when I was growing up, it wouldn't have occurred to me to pick a different color. When they're playing Barbies or dolls or whatever, and two girls are in a relationship, that wouldn't have occurred to me when I was little. I don't even think that would have been allowed. But just the fact that they're allowed to pursue things and ask questions, I think that just really gives me hope that once they leave our home, that hopefully they have a little bit more awareness than I did growing up, that they really will be more inclusive than exclusive. I get hope from having conversations about how my dad was raised in a very prejudiced area. And at 82, he's reading books about how to be anti-racist, and he's unlearning and learning. And that's amazing. My mom is reading books about people's experiences, her changing her heart, because they're very different than hers, her story. And it just gives me hope that people who have lived their lives truly for a long time in one way, and then they're allowing other people's experiences in, and it's changing their hearts, and it's changing my heart to see that experience. So those things give me hope. And I do think it's really easy to get down, and but those little moments are like, oh, this intentionality is making a difference. These conversations are making a difference. These specific, really thoughtful decisions are making a difference. And so that gives me hope, and it gives me hope to keep, not that it would ever be a choice to not do it, and again, that comes from a privilege to think that I can shut a blind eye. That's not what I mean. I just mean, I guess I want to say that it just gives me hope that it's making a difference. We would be doing this work regardless, but to see that maybe it's making a difference is helpful and gives hope to me.
Absolutely. And I think, those negative experiences always stick with us longer than the positive ones. And, for me, having experiences with my kids and recognizing, probably top 3 favorite quotes of all time is still Martin Luther King's, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." And believing that to be true. And I think the reason why it's so important to take those moments and say, it is different for my kids today than it was. It is different. It is not, it's not fixed. It is not okay. We are not arrived.
No.
In any way, shape, or form. But it is not where it was in 1960. It is not where it was in 1940. It is not where it was in 1880. It is not where it was when I was a kid. That we have a society, there is a belief to me that we are in the big picture bending towards justice. And I think the reason why this is important is because if we don't celebrate those small things, it is hard to imagine an even better future. Mm-hmm. If we don't stop like the Israelites did and recognize and celebrate that God delivered them from Moses, it's hard to hold on to hope in the midst of the Babylonian Empire. And I think about, for me, the times that I have had friends that had very, very, what I believe to be destructive ideologies around poverty, about people who were poor, who stayed poor on themselves. And over time, we're able to have conversations to challenge them. You know, I think one close friend of mine in particular, that over a year and a half, we're finally able to get to a place of recognizing that there was more, that there were things at play that had nothing to do with effort and had everything to do with an unjust society. And for them to be like, you know what, I think we agree on that. And like to take a moment just to say, that is awesome. Like those moments when you do get to have that happen, or for those of us in education, those moments that we get to communicate to kids a value and a version of our society, that I think that, you know, if we were to listen to like a bunch of second grade teachers in general, and then we lived out how they taught us, we'd probably have a better society. Like, you know, I think there's a sense of like the care and love we have for each other. And I think that to me, these really do feel like the 3 building blocks for how do you keep hope. It is you're building clear expectation. You need to, this takes time, it takes energy, it takes effort to say, what can I expect? Some honesty. What can I expect out of this person? Is that realistic? And then a boundary to say what is okay for me? Like what is damaging to my physical, emotional, mental identity, and creating intentional boundaries around that. And then figuring out where are those moments where I do see people shifting. I do see change. I do see a progression. You know, things like, you know, it does bring me hope that, you know, every House candidate that ran on a Medicare for All platform won. Like that's a thing to me. Like those small things help me feel hope, because we need to do things that are fueling our hope, because or else the world will steal it. And when we have no hope, we cannot bring about change. When we have no hope, we cannot find healing. When we have no hope, we can't imagine a better version of the future. We can't imagine what a kingdom come on this earth is. Just before we wrap up here, I just wonder if you have any kind of any closing thoughts for us, Christina, and then we'll just take a moment to pray together.
Just the drawing boundaries and setting expectations and living a life that keeps you safe and healthy and with your integrity intact is can be really hard. And I am so fortunate to have the family that I do, and yet I still feel like the black sheep often. And I know, and I've said this a few times, I know that I could say that from a place of privilege. And so I want to say that for people who are in different positions, who are having to have bigger battles and have harder conversations and have, you know, draw boundaries to protect their humanity. While I don't understand that, I am with those people, and I hope that my intentional choices are leading my children to be more compassionate to when, you know, they're creating a kinder world, to where maybe those conversations for other people who are growing up will be less hard, and that there are allies. And so while I stand from a place of privilege, I understand what that means, and that I hope that all these little steps make a difference, and that your stories and you are heard.
Thank you so much, Christina. I just feel like a wealth of wisdom and comfort in all of your words. And thank you so much. Thank you, Allison, as well, for helping loop in the chat, and everyone that added to that. This is really hard, really hard. When we have, this isn't going away. As long as we have a country that is taking their information from different places, the ability for us to live in a place where we're not just having to navigate things that feel corrosive to our soul is part of life. And it's absolutely essential we find hope, and absolutely essentially we preserve our sense of identity and our hearts in that process, while also making being people that are fighting for justice and fighting for the world that we believe Jesus is working towards. So thank you all again. I'm going to just bring us into a moment of prayer here before we finish up this. Well, Jesus, I 100% guarantee every single person on this call can bring to mind a person, a place, a moment where hope was stolen from them because of an interaction with somebody they care about. Whether that person was challenging our identities or that person was just bringing in a perspective that feels fighting against the arc of justice, Lord. And I ask right now that you would bring comfort and peace to those of us who struggle with shame. Comfort and peace for those of us that always feel like we should be doing more, always feel like we should be changing people's minds. Those of us who struggle with deep disappointment that we can't just convince everyone else around us. And that you would speak deep affirmation of our identity, that you are loved and valuable into each one of our hearts. And that you would break the power of lies spoken that would put that into question. And that you would help us walk a path of intentionality, of figuring out what are the expectations we can look for, what are the things we can look for, walk the path of setting boundaries that are dynamic and not the same for everybody, but dependent on who we are and our own traumas and our own injuries and our own identities. And that we would be quick to notice and celebrate the areas that we see positive change. Pray that in your name. Amen.
Amen. Christina and Kyle, thank you guys so much. That was great. We so appreciate you guys kind of taking us into your own worlds and, you know, your worlds with kids and your worlds with your families. And that is a very vulnerable thing. So thank you guys. We really, really appreciate that. I am going to move us into a little bit of housekeeping before we close in some prayer for today. I did want to make a quick note that there's been some back-end magic happening from the amazing Jen Colburn, who collected all of the songs that everyone just mentioned and artists that everyone just mentioned and made a Spotify playlist based on today's service. So you're welcome. Jen is going to drop the link to that in the chat, and you all can listen to Christmas music brought to you by Brownline Church today. So enjoy. If you are newer with us or you're not sure that we have your contact info, we're dropping a link in the chat that is our online Connect card. We'd love for you to fill that out. I would love to connect with you, get to know you a little bit, have a virtual coffee with you, and in particular, try to help you connect with a small group, which is the way that most people in our church start to make friends and get to know people. That's still happening, even though everything is virtual. And so I would love to connect you with that. Also, if you're a regular with us and you do want a quick follow-up just because you have a prayer request or you have a need or you want to grab coffee, you can follow our Sunday check-in, which is just a very brief questionnaire. It'll take you less than 30 seconds to fill out, and we promise to follow up with you. The best ways to stay connected in this community right now while everything is virtual is one, small groups that are happening virtually. If you're not already connected, again, I would love to help you do that. You can find our community directory to reach out to anybody who you would like to get to know or know, but maybe, oh, what is their, how do I reach them via text or how do I reach them via email? You can find a community directory on our website, and the password for that is in the chat right now. You can follow old services on our YouTube channel. You can follow the previous talks or discussions or sermons on our podcast. Our email newsletter goes out weekly, and you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Also, our Discord online community is one of the best places to connect because it's sort of like a building that we own, but it's in the sky. No, I'm just kidding. It's in the cloud. It's not actual building, but it has rooms that we can connect with each other and places that we can talk about things. So we'd love for you to engage via our Discord online community. It is private. It's not out there in the Facebook world for people to connect with. It's just for our church. If you're in a time of need financially due to COVID-19, the church can help you bridge a gap. You can click the link that we're putting in right now to fill out our form, and it's totally confidential. We hope that we can help. we are crowd-funded as a church. And so we do take a moment every week just to thank our donors. One-time gifts that show us love are amazing. If you're a stakeholder and you're somebody who gives in a recurring way, we are so, so grateful. That is the vast majority of our income as a church is recurring gifts. You can give on our website, or you can give via bank quick pay with Zelle, or by mailing a check. Our financial update is up here on the screen, and you can see how we've been doing. Within the next 5 years, we want to double our current monthly income. You can see that we're somewhere between about 8.5 and 10 on a given month. We want to double that in the next 5 years so that we can expand our ability to pastor more representatively in our communities by hiring a woman or person of color on pastoral staff. So that's part of our big dream over the next 5 years. My announcement for this year, it's the only announcement you'll get for the rest of the year. My announcement for this week is that we're going to have a Christmas Eve service this year. And that's kind of fun. We are a community that rents its space on Sundays, and so we've never had a Christmas Eve service. But because everything is virtual, we're going to do that. So 4 p.m. on the afternoon of Christmas Eve, we're going to have our traditional annual carols service, but it will be on Christmas Eve this year, and I'm very excited about that. Our carols service is a special service. Many people in our community, it was their first service that they attended, our carol service, and part of that is because it can be a meaningful experience for somebody, no matter where they're coming from religiously. It's sort of one of those spaces that I think we've crafted to feel like the heartbeat of this church, which is to be a space that feels like home for people who don't necessarily want to spend a lot of time in religious settings. But this can be a spiritual home for them. And our carol service is absolutely like case in point number one for that. And so if you're thinking of a family member who you would like to connect with this community, or you wish would have a little bit more spiritual health or vibrancy in their life, we couldn't recommend the carol service even anymore. So share the link when we get toward that, but we'll be having our carol service on Christmas Eve this year. All right, Kyle is going to lead us in communion, and we'll sing one last song together as a prayer.
Absolutely. Thank you all again for joining us on Advent. We finish our service doing this because we as humans just need the reminder. We need to be able to do things on a continual basis. We very rarely are people that just need a one-off and we're good. And this is our weekly experience and reminder of realizing we make mistakes. We are flawed. We get things wrong. We do things we regret. We need hope. We need help. We need things. Good Lord, do I know that that is true. And it is good and built into the tradition of Jesus to not run from that, to do that right now and pause and say, hey, this is just true of me. And Jesus, you are full of grace and love for me, and you desire to help meet those needs that I can't meet myself. And so we look to you weekly to lay ourselves down and look to you. And we do it together here in this space to realize that we need each other. Oh my Lord, we have so many blind spots, so many things that we miss about who you are, God, and what you desire in this world. And we only get better and closer at discovering that when we interact with others. And so we're so grateful that we're not in this alone, and so grateful we have a community coming from so many different places. And we look to the bread symbolizing Jesus's body broken, the cup symbolizing his blood shed, as a God who accomplished his plan through defeat, through suffering, through laying down one's life for others, through sacrifice, in the midst of betrayal, in the midst of misunderstanding. Because then we have a God that is able to walk through those things with us, to offer us grace and mercy for our places of need. So if you would like to get some kind of food, some kind of drink, I have coffee and a little granola. That's what I'm rocking. But throughout the world and throughout history, all people have used all sorts of things in this time. So if you want to get that right now. On the night that Jesus was betrayed, he broke bread, he gave thanks and said, "This is my body, which is for you. Whenever you do this, do so in remembrance of me." Likewise, he took the cup and he said, "This is my blood shed for you. Whenever you do this, do so in remembrance of me." And we do, especially in the midst of these really difficult conversations, that doing these perfectly is not on the table, and we have a God that does not require perfection. We have a God that walks with us as we try to step forward, doesn't stand at the finish line waiting for us to complete the race. And we are so grateful. We pray that this week you would meet our heart's needs. Walk with us through these days in your name.
My God, wherever I go, glory. Where I reap and where I sow, glory. In my hand it grips the thorn, glory. In the still and in the storm, glory. Glory. Oh, we labor unto glory till heaven and earth are one. Oh, we labor unto glory until God's kingdom comes. The sun, it shines and then goes down, glory. Rain, it pours and beats the ground, glory. Dust, it blows and ends my days, glory. Hearts, they burn beneath your gaze, glory. Glory. Oh, we labor unto glory till heaven and earth are one. Oh, we labor unto glory until God's kingdom comes. My heart, my hands, their kingdom bound, glory. Where thorns no longer curse the ground, glory. So trim the wick and light the flame, glory. Our work, it will not be in vain, glory. Glory. Oh, we labor unto glory till heaven and earth are one. Oh, we labor unto glory until God's kingdom comes. We labor unto glory till heaven and earth are one. Oh, we labor unto glory until God's kingdom comes.
Lord, keep us and be with us this week. May we find ourselves quickly having grace on ourselves and quickly having grace on others. Give us a vision for justice. Give us a vision for hope. May we walk through this season aware of our complicated and challenging feelings and quick to offer them to you as a God who walked through suffering and offers new life. Pray that in your name. Amen.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We will see you next week. If you're sticking around for the I'm Still Here book club, just stay with us and we'll make sure that you are placed in the right room. Bye.
Bye, Sophia.
Can you say hi? Hi. All right, see you guys later. We're gonna go shopping.
Thank you again, Christina. Really appreciated it. It was I had high expectations after our conversation, but you surpassed any high expectations that I would have had. So
Well,
thank you
thank
for
you.
saying yes.
Thank you for including me. Hope
I'm not-
it's easy to get like so many thoughts that it doesn't come out very eloquently. So hopefully it was okay.
No, I thought you were able to bring us along really well. So I really appreciated it. So you should feel good. And if you have any questions of like, did I do it in tonight, you should just tell those to be quiet because they don't know what they're talking about. So
Thank you.
okay, I'll sign off. Good
All
luck.
right.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
All right, bye.
Vince, is there any reason for us to be in a small group, or can we just stay in the main room?
Sorry, I was on the other side of the room. No, there is no reason for you to. So you just do here. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Thanks,
Ben
Ben.
is not joining us today, so when we're all ready, I have done my habitual thing of starting cooking something at a bad time. So that's
You're my
happening.
hero.